Hello, my name's Tuppence. So I am coming to the end of my fruit themed videos, but before I finish, I want to have another go at this apple. I've already made it out of resin, so now I'm going to make it out of Aqua Cast, because one of my most favourite things to do with Aqua Cast is to decoupage it. And there are so many things that you can use to do that. Today I'm going to be using some patterned tissue paper. But in the past, I've also printed my own decoupage sheets onto tissue and ordinary copy paper using an inkjet. So to start, I need to pour the base, and I already know the measurements that I need because I've used this mould to make this piece. And if you're interested in seeing that, I've left a link in the description box below. I've written the amounts that I need in my mould, and that's 212 powder and 75 water. And that is specifically for Aqua Cast, as that's the eco resin that I use. I've already measured out my powder, and now I just need to measure out the water. Then I can add the powder into it because I think that makes it mix much easier. So I've got my scale zeroed and I'm on grams, and it said 75, so I just need to add the water. Okay, oh, for a moment it was bang on, but it's a little bit over, that's okay. I am going to adjust this slightly and put slightly more water in anyway. I do want this to be pretty fluid. Let me just grab a mixing stick, and I'm going to add the powder in a little bit at a time. Again, I just find this easier. Make sure that everything is mixed in rather than just dump it all in. You can end up with quite a lot of lumps if you do that. Now, I've been using a new batch of Aqua Cast, and I don't know if there's some difference in the mixture or not, but I've been finding that I get an awful lot of bubbles in my pieces of late. So I'm trying something different. I tried it in my last video and I'm going to do it again, and that's to add very dilute soap. So this is hand soap, and I'm hoping that it's going to soften the water. I live in a hard water area, and I don't really know if this makes a difference or not, but I did try this last time and I had noticeably fewer bubbles in my mix. It was really silky. I had no bubbles along the top edge. Now I've got everything mixed in. I'm just going to add a tiny bit more water. Again, I'm just hoping that's going to make it easier for the bubbles to rise up to the surface and pop. This is quite a curved pot, so yeah, there's definitely going to be bubbles stuck on those curves. I'm going to add a final squirt of the soap. It's not really strong enough to make the bubbles. It's so dilute, it's just more water than anything. And then I'm making sure that I stir this all the way through. That's looking pretty good. Right, just scrape off this stick, pop it over there. I'm just going to tap this up and down and try to bring the bubbles up to the surface. And if I have got any unmixed powder, that should rise up too. I'm going to start by pouring a little bit into the bottom of the apple pot. Just want enough to make sure that I coat all of the bottom. And then I can tap that up and down, make sure it all distributes itself. And I'll give this a bit of a squeeze. Now you can see there's a lot of bubbles rising up on the top. So I'm just going to twist this around so that it coats the inside of the ball. And make sure that there aren't any bubbles stuck along that sharp bottom edge. Then I can put a little bit more in. I'm not going to top it up all the way at the moment. I want to make sure that I fill up this lid first. It has a stalk on it, and that is pretty narrow and thin, and it curves slightly, so I want to make sure that I squeeze that to get all of the bubbles out. This is why I wanted to make the Aqua Cast slightly more fluid. It's giving me a little bit more time to work, and it can flow easier into the tight areas of the mould. So I'm just going to add a little bit more to both of the pots. You can see it is starting to thicken up now, but when I tap it, it does level out. Because there's a lip here, I'm just going to fold this edge back. Again, this is to let the bubbles out because they will get trapped underneath there. Now I can add some more, and this should be enough to fill this up. Yeah, you can see it's starting to hold its shape when I pour it in. All right, let me fill this up. Whoop. I've got more than I need. So I'm just going to tap that. I'll do this continually for about the next 5-10 minutes. I'm just going to scoop out some of this because otherwise I'm going to make a mess over the edge of the mould. All right. Yeah, I will tap these for a little while. This is going to take a little bit longer to set because I have put some more water in it. So I'll be back in about an hour and a half, and these should be ready for demould. Okay, these are all cured and I can demould them. And I'm interested to see whether I get the same effects as last time, and that soap really does make a difference. That is looking pretty good so far. I would normally have bubbles stuck under there. Just going to be careful of trying to get this stalk out because I don't want to snap it off. This isn't completely cured yet. Wow, that is so smooth. All right, I have a very tiny couple of micro bubbles around that edge. But to be honest with you, nothing. Now the back of Aqua Cast usually is rough, but I will be able to sand that. That is a world of difference to what I usually get. How about this? Now I am expecting there to be bubbles along that curve. I just get that folded back and hopefully I won't have any bubbles at the top. Well, that actually looks really good. That is very smooth and silky. I fully expected to get some bubbles there. That's pretty normal, but it is normally a lot worse than this, to be honest with you. So I'm happy with that. That's not bad at all. That bottom is a little bit rough, so I do need to smooth that flat, but I just want to fold that mould back the right way round. Important to do that pretty quickly. I need to clean up all these flakes in a minute, but first I want to see if the lid fits and what it looks like. Yes, perfect. I love it. That's really nice. That's going to be a great base to decoupage upon. So I do need to clean up the bottom here. It's still soft and that's the perfect time to file it. I'm just using a nail file and I'm going round taking off that sharp and flaky edges. I want to try and make it flat as well so that it doesn't rock when it's standing upright. I'm going to continue the filing off camera, then it needs to dry before I can add the decoupage paper. So this is the tissue paper that I'm going to use and it is just gift wrapped. There's 3 sheets that come in this and I'm loving this pattern. This comes from just a local supermarket. I have had it for a little while, but I'm sure there are plenty of other options. It's pretty high quality and the print side is, well, it's really shiny. It's got a kind of satin smooth surface. Now if I want to cut out my image, I'm not actually going to cut it out. I'm going to use some water and a paintbrush and I'm just going to draw a line around where I want to cut that out. Because this is shiny, it's kind of beading up. The water is beading up on the surface. But if I just keep going over that area that I want, and then I can wipe off the excess, that has soaked in enough so that when I tear this apart, it should follow that line and I get a nice ragged edge. That always looks better and blends better when you're trying to do decoupage. So I'm just going to keep marking out where I want to cut. And I don't really want that pink flower, so I'm just going to go over that. Just go over the same line a couple of times and push that water into the paper. And then I'm going to keep my thumb over my image and I'm going to keep that thumb still and I'm going to use my other thumb to pull the paper away. That way I should protect the image and I don't risk tearing that accidentally. This PVA craft glue would be perfectly suitable to use for decoupage. I like to use my bookbinding glue though, but I can't use it straight from the pot because it's pretty thick. So I'm just going to squirt a little bit into the bottom of this medicine cup. I want a decent enough amount, not too much. And then I'm going to try and add an equal amount of water, just tap water, and get that mixed around. So I want this to be pretty thin. I don't want any lumps. I'll just keep stirring it around. I'm going to add a little bit more glue to that because that was quite a lot of water. We want it to be roughly 1 to 1. And that'll be fine. I like to use my finger to apply this to the pot and I'm just going to spread it out in a really thin layer. I don't want too much because it is pretty watery and that will just cause wrinkles in the tissue paper. Once I've got that spread out, I'm going to place down the tissue, try and get that arranged first time because if you keep picking it up, you've got the risk of tearing it. Then I'm going to get a little bit more glue and I'm going to paint that over the top and just smooth everything down. Now I've purposely kept the apple white and the background to the pattern is also white and that just means that it will blend in a lot easier. So I'm going to keep brushing glue across the top and anywhere that I can see the paper wrinkling, I'm using my nail to gently press that out. Now I need to shape this around the curve, so I'm going to put a slit into the paper. I've done it where the white is because that way it won't interfere with the pattern. And then I just need to brush some glue back over the top, and I can fold that over. The paper is so thin that it really won't be noticeable. So again, I've got some wrinkles, just use my finger to gently smooth those out. I'm not going to worry too much if I've got tiny wrinkles, because as this glue dries, that paper will kind of stretch out a little bit and you'll lose most of them. Right, so I've got that as smooth as I possibly can. So I've got a little bit hanging off the bottom. I'm just going to leave that as it is for now. I'll let this all dry before I remove that. I'm going to carry on and add all of my images to the pot in exactly the same way. I really like to place images that will go across the lid and onto the base of the pot so that you line them up when you put them together. I've got the lid in place and I'm just gluing down my cherry blossom. So it's one whole piece. I'm gluing it across the two pieces. Make sure that I smooth everything out and get rid of the wrinkles. So you can see I am using a brush. Let me just get rid of that excess piece. But I do end up resorting to my nails. I just find that much easier. Just tucking that down a little bit, and then I need to separate the two pieces. Ordinarily, I would wait for this to dry a little bit before I do that. That way you don't risk tearing it. And I did tear it just a little bit, but it looks all right. So I'm just going to place that back where I want it to be, make sure that the patterns line up, and then I can use the brush to gently smooth this down so that it follows the curve of the lid. I also want to put an image that goes across that leaf. So I'm just going to tear a bit of the paper off. Then I can lay that down and start to smooth it so that it shapes around the leaf. I'm going to use the brush to press into all of those angles. And while the paper's wet, it should mould around it more easily. Okay, I've just got an excess bit that I don't want. So I'm scratching that off with my nail and I can remove that. I'm going to carry on and line up the rest of the pattern underneath. I probably should have lined that up a little better. You can see the design continues though, so it's okay. Again, smooth those pieces down. Before the image on the top dries out, I'm just going to take the edge of the brush and really press that paper into the leaf that's underneath, tamping it down on the top so that I pick up the texture. Then I'm going to continue to add images onto the pot, and I'll leave it to dry before I can varnish it. The tissue paper is really well stuck down, but it does need protecting, so I'm going to give this a couple of coats of varnish. I also want this to look like a kiln-fired ceramic. So the first coat of varnish I'm applying is diluted. It's 3 parts of acrylic varnish to 1 part water. I'm going to make sure that I cover everything. I'll let it dry, and that will take anywhere from 25 minutes to an hour. And then I'll add a further 2 coats of the dilute varnish before adding a final coat of full strength varnish. That way I'll get a really glossy shine. The brush I'm using is really soft, and I'm spreading this out in a very thin layer so that I don't get any drips. Okay, I'm going to let this dry before I add my other coats. I want to add some metallic touches now. And this is something called Cerne Relief. It's usually used for glass painting, for making outlines. It's a dimensional paint. I've got the silver one here. I used to have a gold one, but I don't have any more of that. So rather than buy another one, I want to see if I can make it. because I also have this. I used to do glass painting. This is really old packaging, but this is something called Dimensional Magic. It's a clear varnish-like paint which remains dimensional and gives texture once it's dried, which is kind of what I want apart from the clear bit. I figure if I add this gold marble mica powder, it should work the same. So I'm going to add a little bit of this liquid into a needle nose bottle. You just squeeze some in there. I've got about a fifth of the bottle, maybe a little less. So I'll start with that first. I want to make sure that this works before I mix up a large batch. And I'm just going to pick up some of the powder just on the end of this spoon because that will fit down inside that pot. I'm going to add quite a lot of the mica powder because I'm figuring that will probably help to form paste as well. All right, so that's 2 scoops. Let's get another one. Oh, maybe not that much, otherwise it won't go through the top. And I think most of that went over me. Yeah, I'm going to do one more. I think 4 would be enough. All right, I've made a heck of a mess, but never mind. Clean all that in a minute. We just grab a mic brush stick which will fit down inside there. I don't think there's any point me putting in a ball bearing and try and shake that up because it should be a thicker paste and then the ball bearing's just not going to move around. Just keep mixing that up with a stick. It looks nice and gold. Well, that's remaining in a bead on the table, so hopefully this is going to work. I don't know. We'll give it a go. I've put the lid back on and I've given it a shake. So now the question is, will it actually come out? Oh, yep, it does. And that is making perfect little beads. It's not running on the table or anything. They do look nice and round and shiny. So can I make a line? Yep. All right. I'm going to leave those for a little while and see what they look like. And if everything is okay, I'm going to put it onto the pot. Well, the test went pretty well. Everything stayed dimensional and it looks really pretty. So I'm going to add this to the pot. I want to trace some of the lines that are already there, just some of the shapes and the petals, and add gilded highlights. It should look nice and gold and it will remain textured. Now, of course, because I've actually varnished this already, if I don't like something or it's just not working, I should be able to wipe it off with a baby wipe or paper towel or something. So I'm just going to keep adding dots and lines, anything that I feel like doing. Of course, I just need to be careful that I don't smudge the ones that I've already done as I'm turning this around. I'm going to use some of the paint on the stalk because I think that needs to be gold. I'm just putting some blobs on and using a brush to spread it out. And I can get all the way down to the bottom. Unfortunately, the needle tip quickly clogged up, so I just pulled that out. You can still use it though. It's pretty easy to use even like this. So I just want to squeeze that. Whoops, that's a little thicker than I want. You can get thin lines. But because I've varnished this, I just need to wipe that off and I can start again. So let me quickly test that on the table and then I can add a thinner line. So I had to wait for some of the other pieces that I'd put on to dry before I can continue all the way round. It's all dry now and I'm loving it everywhere except for that stalk. I think it's probably a little bit too thick and it just looks so dark. So I'm going to use the chrome pen from J. Diction and just go over the top. It's a much nicer gold. So I can colour in most of it, but I can't get right down to the bottom, otherwise I'm just going to get some on the lid. So I'm going to scribble it onto my silicone mat and then I can pick it up using my brush and I can paint it all the way down to the bottom of the stalk without getting it on top of the lid. I think the choice of mica that I used to make this paste probably wasn't the best. If you apply it quite thickly, the paint does come out dark. So I'd like to use a lighter gold mica in future and try other colours too. To clean up my brush, I'm just going to spray it with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and use a baby wipe, and I'm going to keep repeating that until it's nice and clean, and then I can reuse that for another time. So here it is, my finished apple, and it looks so different from the resin apple that I made a little while ago. I really love the dimensional paint. It worked a treat, and that means I can add lots of different coloured micas and make my own. Look at the dimension I've got on those dots there. It's really pretty, and it just adds a little bit of glitz. If I just line this up properly, no, not that way, let's turn it that way. Yeah, I love the way that transitions from the pot onto the lid. It looks seamless, makes everything look like a high-end ceramic. And there are so many different patterns and designs that you can choose from. Just tissue paper, which is pretty ordinary, and I've made it into something, well, I think pretty wow. I love it. And if you love this video, I would appreciate if you could give it a thumbs up, if you could comment and share it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't. It's free to you, it will really help me, and you'll be able to come back and see what I'm going to make next time. I'm going to leave you with some photos. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.